It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy and the clock ticks slower than usual. Sixth period science class, room 214, with Mr. Grayson droning on about gravitational pull or some crap nobody cared about. The vibe was dead. Kids, doodling in notebooks, sneaking glances at their phones, or just staring out the window at the gray sky. That's when Tommy Brewer, this scrawny kid with a mop of curly hair and a chipped front tooth, decided to open his mouth. "My dad works at NASA," he said, leaning back in his chair like he'd just dropped the mic. The room erupted. Laughter bounced off the walls, sharp, mean, the kind that cuts you down before you even know you're bleeding. Jake Russo, the class clown with a smirk permanently glued to his face, was the loudest. "Oh yeah, Tommy. What's he do? Mop the floors at the rocket factory?" More laughs. Even Sarah Miller, the quiet girl who never picked on anyone, hid a giggle behind her textbook. Tommy's face went red, his hands balling into fists under the desk. But he didn't say anything back. He just sat there, taking it. Mr. Grayson sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Settle down, everyone. Tommy, let's not derail the lesson with tall tales, all right?" That just fueled the fire. More snickers, a couple of fake coughs that sounded suspiciously like liar. Tommy slumped lower in his seat, staring at his sneakers. Class moved on, but the damage was done. By lunch, the whole school was buzzing. With it. Tommy Brewer's dad works at NASA. "Sure, buddy. I was there, sitting 3 rows back, watching it all go down. I didn't laugh. Not because I'm some saint, but because something about Tommy's voice when he said it stuck with me. It wasn't loud or cocky. It was quiet. Almost like he didn't want to say it, but had to. Like it slipped out. I couldn't shake it." Fast forward to the next day. Wednesday. Same class, same vibe, except Tommy wasn't there. His desk sat empty. A ghost spot in the middle of the room. People noticed, but nobody cared enough to ask. Jake cracked a joke about Tommy blasting off with NASA, and that was that. Mr. Grayson started scribbling equations on the board, and I was halfway to zoning out when the door swung open. Not a knock. Not a creak. It slammed open, rattling the hinges. Every head snapped up. Standing there was this guy, tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that could cut glass. He wasn't dressed like some regular dad picking up a forgotten lunchbox. No, this dude was in a crisp black suit, the kind you see in movies about spies or secret agents. His tie was blood red, and his eyes, man, his eyes were like steel, scanning the room like he was sizing us all up for a fight. Behind him, the hallway light flickered, casting this weird shadow that made him look even bigger. The class went dead silent. Even Jake shut his trap, which was a miracle in itself. Mr. Grayson dropped his marker mid-sentence, and it clattered to the floor. "Can I help you?" he stammered, pushing his glasses up his sweaty nose. The man didn't answer right away. He stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking against the tile, and stopped right in front of Tommy's empty desk. He reached into his jacket. Every kid in that room flinched, like we thought he was pulling a gun or something, and came out with a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it with one smooth flick of his wrist and held it up. It was a photo. A kid in a baseball cap, grinning at the camera. "Tommy." "Where is he?" the man said. His voice was low, gravelly, like he'd smoked a pack a day since birth. But there was something else in it. Something urgent, almost desperate. Mr. Grayson blinked. Tommy Brewer? He's not here today. Absent. Who are you?" The man didn't answer the question. Instead, he turned the photo toward us, holding it out like an accusation. "Anyone seen him? Yesterday? After school?" His eyes drilled into us one by one. Nobody said a word. I felt my stomach twist. Something was wrong. Way wrong. Jake, because he's an idiot who can't read a room, smirked and muttered, "What? NASA sends you to pick up their janitor's kid?" It was barely audible, but the man heard it. His head snapped toward Jake, so fast I thought his neck would break. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed Jake by the collar, and yanked him out of his chair like he weighed nothing. Jake's smirk vanished, replaced by wide-eyed panic. "Say that again," the man growled, his face inches from Jake's. "Go on." Nothing, man." "I didn't mean it," Jake squeaked, hands up like he was surrendering. The rest of us, Froze, barely breathing. Mr. Grayson finally found his voice and shouted, "Sir, put him down! I'm calling security!" The man didn't even glance at him. He dropped Jake back into his seat, hard, and turned to the rest of us. "Tommy's gone, missing since last night. You think this is a joke? You think NASA's a punchline?" He pulled something else. From his jacket, a badge. Shiny, official, with the NASA logo stamped across it. My heart stopped. The room went so quiet you could hear the clock ticking again. "I'm Daniel Brewer," he said, tucking the badge back. "Tommy's father, and I need to know where my son is." Cue the gasps. Sarah dropped her pencil. Jake looked like he might puke. Mr. Grayson just stood there, mouth open, like he'd forgotten how to speak. Me? I was replaying Tommy's words in my head. My dad works at NASA. Holy crap. He wasn't lying. Before anyone could process it, the lights flickered. Not just in the room, the whole building. A low hum started, like machinery waking up, vibrating through the floor. Daniel Brewer's head whipped toward the window. "No," he muttered, more to himself than us. "Not now." He bolted for the door, but it was too late. The windows shattered inward, glass spraying everywhere, kids screaming, desks flipping as everyone dove for cover. I hit the floor, heart pounding, and peeked up just in time to see it. A shadow outside, massive, hovering. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't a plane. It was something else. Sleek, metallic, with lights pulsing along its edges. A ship. A freaking spaceship. Daniel cursed under his breath, pulling what looked like a gun from his belt, but not any gun I'd ever seen. It glowed faintly, humming with energy. "Stay down!" he barked at us, then ran toward the broken window, firing at the thing outside. Blue streaks of light shot from the weapon, slamming into the ship with a sound like thunder. The air smelled like burnt metal and ozone. Kids were screaming, crying, crawling under desks. Mr. Grayson was yelling into his phone, but the line must have been dead because he kept shouting, "Hello! Hello!" I couldn't move. I just watched. As Daniel Brewer, Tommy's dad, the NASA guy, fought whatever the hell that thing was. The ship fired back, red beams slicing through the wall, leaving scorch marks and melted plaster. One hit the whiteboard, and it exploded into a cloud of dust. Then, out of nowhere, the ship stopped. It hovered there, silent, like it was waiting. Daniel lowered his weapon, breathing hard, and muttered something I couldn't hear. A hatch opened on the side of the craft, and a ramp slid down. Two figures stepped out. Tall, thin, wearing suits that shimmered like liquid metal. They didn't walk so much as glide, their movements too smooth, too perfect. My brain screamed aliens, but I couldn't even process it. One of them raised a hand, and a voice echoed, not from its mouth, but from everywhere, like it was inside our heads. "Daniel Brewer. You cannot hide him forever." Daniel squared his shoulders, gripping his weapon tighter. "You're not taking my son." The alien, or whatever it was, tilted its head. "He is not yours to keep. He belongs to us." What the hell? I glanced around. Jake was shaking, Sarah was sobbing, and Mr. Grayson looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Me? I was still on the floor, trying to make sense of it. Tommy's dad works at NASA. Tommy's missing. Aliens show up. My mind was spinning, connecting dots that didn't even make a picture yet. Before Daniel could respond, the second figure raised a device, small, silver, glowing, and a beam shot out, hitting him square in the chest. He stumbled back, dropping the gun, and collapsed against Tommy's desk. The aliens stepped forward, but then, boom! An explosion rocked the building, coming from the parking lot. Smoke billowed up outside, and the ship wobbled, its lights flickering. Through the haze, I saw them. More people in black suits, charging toward the ship with weapons like Daniel's. Backup. NASA backup, maybe? They opened fire, and the aliens retreated, the ramp snapping shut as the craft shot upward, vanishing into the clouds with a sonic boom that rattled my teeth. Daniel groaned, pulling himself up, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The other suits rushed in, one of them, a woman with short hair and a scar across her cheek, kneeling beside him. Where's Tommy? She demanded. I don't know, he rasped. They took him. Last night. I thought I could stop them. The woman cursed, then turned to us, still cowering in the wreckage of the classroom. Nobody leaves this room until we say so. Understood? And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Tommy's dad working at NASA. This was bigger, way bigger. Tommy wasn't just missing, he was taken. By them. And now we were all in the middle of it. The bell rang, but nobody moved. Outside, sirens wailed, growing closer. Daniel looked at me, right at me, and for a split second, I swear he recognized something. You, he said, pointing. What's your name? Ethan, I stammered, my voice barely working. He nodded, like that meant something. Ethan, you're coming with me. Ethan, you're coming with me. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I just stared at Daniel Brewer, Tommy's dad, this NASA badass bleeding on the floor of my wrecked classroom, surrounded by shattered glass and scorch marks from whatever the hell just happened. My brain was screaming, nope, I'm out, but my mouth didn't get the memo. Me? Why me? I croaked, still half sprawled under a desk. Daniel didn't answer. He just pushed himself up, wincing, and grabbed his glowing gun off the floor. The woman with the scar, let's call her Scarface because she looked like she'd seen some shit, shot me a glance that could have frozen lava. Move it, kid, she snapped, her voice all business. We don't have time for Q&A. The other black suit guys were already herding the class toward the back of the room, barking orders like drill sergeants. Stay put, hands where we can see 'em. Kids were crying. Jake was mumbling apologies to nobody in particular, and Mr. Grayson was slumped against the wall, clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. Outside, the sirens were deafening now. Cops, fire trucks, maybe the freaking National Guard for all I knew. But Daniel wasn't waiting for them. He grabbed my arm, yanked me to my feet, and started dragging me toward the door. Wait, hold up. I yanked back, panic kicking in. I don't even know what's happening. Aliens? Tommy? What the hell's going on? He stopped just for a second and looked at me. Those steel eyes softened, but only a fraction. You saw him yesterday. Tommy, after school. I know you did. My stomach dropped. He was right. I hadn't told anyone. Not the class. Not even myself, really. But I had seen Tommy. After the NASA comment blew up in his face, I'd spotted him behind the gym, sitting on the curb, kicking rocks into the dirt. He'd looked off. Not just embarrassed off, but scared off. Like he was waiting for something bad to happen. I'd meant to say something, maybe ask if he was okay, but I chickened out and kept walking. Now that moment was biting me in the ass. Yeah, I saw him, I admitted, my voice shaky. But he was fine, just sitting there. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't fine, he was marked. He didn't explain what that meant, just turned and pulled me out into the hallway. Scarface followed, her boots pounding the tile, while the other suits stayed behind to deal with the chaos. The school was a madhouse. Lockdown alarms blaring, red lights flashing, kids and teachers huddled in corners or sprinting for exits. Daniel didn't slow down. He moved. Favs were screaming past us now, big and loud enough to drown out the sirens. We hit the stairwell, taking the steps two at a time, and burst out into the parking lot. The air stank of smoke and burnt rubber from whatever exploded out here. Probably those NASA guys taking out the alien ship's backup. A black SUV screeched up, tires smoking, and Scarface shoved me into the back seat. Daniel slid in beside me, and we peeled out before I could even buckle up. Where are we going? I asked, gripping the seat as the car swerved around a corner. To find my son, Daniel said, staring straight ahead. And you're gonna help me. Me? I'm just some kid. I don't know anything about... I gestured wildly at the gun in his lap, the madness we'd just left behind. This! You know more than you think. Scarface cut in from the driver's seat, her eyes flicking to me in the rear view. You saw him last. That makes you a witness, maybe a target. A target? My voice cracked. What? Like they're after me now? Maybe, Daniel said grimly. Or maybe you've got something they want. I wanted to scream I don't have anything. but the words stuck in my throat. Because deep down, I wasn't sure. That look Tommy gave me yesterday, those scared eyes, kept replaying in my head, like he knew something, like he was trying to tell me something without saying it. The SUV tore through town, past strip malls and gas stations, until pavement gave way to dirt roads and trees closed in around us. We pulled up to this rundown warehouse, peeling paint, busted windows, the kind of place you'd hide a body. Scarface killed the engine, and Daniel hauled me out, marching me inside. The place was empty except for a table in the middle, covered with maps, laptops, and some tech I couldn't even name. Screens blinking, wires snaking everywhere. "Sit," Daniel ordered, pointing to a rickety chair. I sat, heart hammering, while he and Scarface started barking at each other in some kind of code, words like signal trace and abduction protocol flying over my head. I caught snippets. Tommy's not the first. They've been watching us. Something big's coming. Finally, Daniel turned to me, slamming a photo on the table. It was Tommy again, but different. Younger, maybe 5 or 6, standing next to Daniel in front of a rocket. "This is my kid," he said, voice raw. "He's not just some random target. He's special." "Special how?" I asked, barely a whisper. Daniel hesitated, then leaned in close. "He's not entirely human." I laughed. Couldn't help it. It was too insane. "What, like he's part alien or something?" But Daniel didn't laugh back. He just stared at me, dead serious, and my stomach flipped. "Not exactly," he said. "It's complicated, experimental, classified. But those things, the ones that took him, they think he's the key to something. Something they've been after for years." Before I could wrap my head around that, the laptops on the table started beeping, loud, urgent. Scarface rushed over, her face going pale. "They're back," she said, tapping keys like her life depended on it. "And they're close." Daniel grabbed his gun, checking it with a flick of his wrist. "How close?" "Too close." She pointed at a screen, a map with a red dot blinking right over us. "They tracked him." Her eyes slid to me. "Or you." My blood ran cold. "Me? Why me?" No answer. Because right then, the roof exploded. Not figuratively, literally. Metal tore apart, debris raining down, and that same humming sound from school filled the air. I dove under the table as the ship descended, hovering inside the warehouse like a nightmare come to life. Those alien figures glided down again, their suits shimmering, their movements silent and eerie. Daniel opened fire, blue streaks lighting up the dark, but they didn't flinch. One raised that silver device, and a beam hit Scarface square in the shoulder. She dropped, groaning, and Daniel roared, charging them like a man possessed. I scrambled out from under the table, not knowing what to do, when one of them turned, to me. Its head tilted, and that voice echoed in my skull again. "You carry it." "Carry what?" I shouted, backing up until I hit the wall. No answer, just that stare, like it could see through me. Then it lunged, faster than anything. Human, and grabbed my arm. Pain shot through me, white hot, and my vision blurred. I saw flashes, stars, machines, Tommy's face, before everything went black. When I came to, I was on the floor, Daniel kneeling over me, shaking my shoulders. "Ethan, wake up, damn it!" The ship was gone. Scarface was up, clutching her. Arm, blood seeping through her fingers. The warehouse was trashed, smoking holes in the walls, the table flipped, laptops sparking. What happened?" I rasped, my head pounding. Daniel's face was grim. "They scanned you. Took something. I don't know what yet." "Took something?" I touched my arm where it grabbed me. Nothing there. No mark. But it still burned. Scarface limped over, holding a cracked tablet. "They didn't get everything," she said, showing us a grainy video feed. It was Tommy, alive, strapped to a chair in some sterile, glowing room. His eyes were wide, terrified, but he was breathing. "He's still out there, and they're not done with us." Daniel helped me up, his grip iron tight. "We're getting him back," he said, more a vow than a statement. "And you're in this now, Ethan, whether you like it or not." I didn't like it. Not one bit. But as we piled back into the SUV, the engine roaring to life, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That whatever they'd taken from me, or left behind, was gonna change everything. The SUV roared down the dirt road, kicking up dust and gravel as Scarface floored it. Daniel was in the passenger seat, hunched over that cracked tablet, replaying the grainy footage of Tommy strapped to that chair. His jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might shatter. I was in the back, still reeling, my arm throbbing like a bad sunburn even though there wasn't a mark on it. Whatever those things did to me in the warehouse, it wasn't over. I could feel it. This weird buzz in my head like static I couldn't tune out. Where are we going? I finally asked, my voice hoarse from yelling and, almost dying twice in one day. Base, Scarface said, not taking her eyes off the road. Off-grid. They won't find us there. Base? I leaned forward, gripping the seat. Like a NASA base? With rockets and stuff? Daniel snorted, a bitter sound. Not exactly, it's more unofficial. A fallback for when things go sideways, like now. Sideways? I laughed, half hysterical. Dude, aliens blew up. My school kidnapped your kid and zapped me with some freaky mind ray. We're past sideways. This is upside down and on fire. He didn't argue, just kept staring at that screen, at Tommy's scared face. We'll fix it, he muttered. I'll fix it. The drive felt endless. Hours, maybe, though the adrenaline made it hard to tell. The trees thinned out, and we pulled up to what looked like an abandoned farm. A sagging barn, a rusted silo, fields gone wild with weeds. Scarface punched a code into a keypad hidden under a fake rock. Yeah, a fake rock. And the ground rumbled. A section of the field slid open, revealing a ramp that dropped into darkness. She gunned the engine, and we plunged underground. The base was insane. Concrete walls, flickering fluorescent lights, racks of weapons and tech that looked straight out of a sci-fi movie. People in tactical gear rushed around, shouting into headsets, screens everywhere flashing maps and data. It was like stepping into a war room, or a bunker for the end of the world. Scarface parked, and Daniel hauled me out, marching me toward a metal door at the far end. Inside was a small room, sterile and cold, with a single chair bolted to the floor. A guy in a lab coat, bald, wiry, with glasses so thick they magnified his eyes, stood there, holding a scanner that beeped like a Geiger counter. This him? He asked, nodding at me. Yeah, Daniel said, shoving me into the chair. Scan him. Now. Whoa, hold up! I squirmed, but Daniel's hand clamped down on my shoulder. Scan me for what? What they did to you, he said, his voice low. What they took, or left. Lab coat guy didn't waste time. He waved the scanner over me, starting at my head, working down. It beeped faster when it hit my arm, then went nuts, shrill and loud. He frowned, tapping the screen. Huh. That's not good. Not good how? I demanded, panic creeping back in. He ignored me, turning to Daniel. There's a signal, embedded. Low frequency, but active. They tagged him. Tagged me? My voice shot up an octave. Like a freaking tracking chip? More like a beacon, lab coat guy said, adjusting his glasses. They can find him. Anywhere. Daniel cursed, slamming a fist against the wall. Can you block it? Maybe, but it's deep, neural, not just subcutaneous. I'd need time. We don't have time, Scarface cut in, storming into the room. She'd patched up her shoulder, but blood still stained her sleeve. They're already moving. Satellite picked up their ship, heading west, fast. West where? Daniel snapped. Coordinates match an old launch site, Nevada, abandoned, or so we thought. Daniel's eyes narrowed. They're taking him there. That's where they'll open it. Open what? I asked, but nobody answered. They were already moving, Daniel barking orders, Scarface grabbing gear, lab coat guy muttering about signal jammers. I was just sitting there, tagged like some lost dog, when the ground shook. Not a little tremor, a full-on quake, rattling the walls, knocking stuff off shelves. Alarms blared, red lights flashing, and a voice crackled over the intercom. Breach! Perimeter breach! Scarface drew her weapon, a sleek pistol that hummed like Daniel's. They found us. How? Daniel roared. We're off-grid, she pointed at me. Him. My heart stopped. The beacon. They'd tracked me here to this secret base because of whatever they'd planted in my head. Before I could apologize or freak out, the ceiling caved in. Concrete and steel rained down, and that damn ship hovered. Above us again, its lights pulsing, its hatch already opening. Those alien figures dropped in, silent and deadly, and all hell broke loose. Daniel and Scarface opened fire, blue streaks tearing through the air. The lab guy dove behind a crate, screaming about containment protocols. I bolted for cover, ducking behind a toppled table as red beams sliced through the room. One hit a rack of weapons, and it exploded. Shrapnel flying, heat washing. Over me. I peeked out and saw Daniel grappling with one of the aliens, his gun gone, using his fists like a madman. Scarface was pinned, trading shots with another, her face a mask of fury. Then one of them turned to me. That same head tilt. That same voice in my skull. You will come. It glided toward me and I froze, trapped, nowhere to run. But then, boom, a blast rocked the room, and the alien staggered. Lab coat guy popped up, holding some jury-rigged device that smoked and sparked. Jammer, he yelled. It's working! The alien's movement slowed, like it was glitching, and Daniel seized the chance. He tackled it, slamming it into the floor, and Scarface finished it off with a point-blank shot. The other one retreated, vanishing up into the ship, and the craft shot skyward, leaving a gaping hole in the ceiling. We were alive, barely. The base was trashed, bodies and debris everywhere. Daniel hauled me up, breathing hard. You okay? No, I snapped, shaking. I'm tagged, hunted, and I don't even know why. He didn't argue, just turned to lab coat guy. How long can that jammer hold? Hours, maybe, he said, wiping sweat off his bald head. But they'll adapt. They always do. Then we move, Scarface said, slinging a rifle over her shoulder. Nevada, now. The ride out was tense, the SUV loaded with gear and us, me, Daniel, Scarface and lab coat guy, who I learned was named Dr. Patel. Nobody talked much. Daniel kept checking the tablet, Tommy's image frozen on the screen. I kept rubbing my arm, that buzz in my head growing louder, like a radio stuck between stations. Dr. Patel had strapped some clunky bracelet on me, the jammer, but it didn't feel like enough. We hit the Nevada desert at dusk, the sky bleeding red and orange. The launch site was a ghost town, rusted towers, cracked concrete, a skeleton of what it used to be. But it wasn't empty. That ship was there, parked, on a launch pad like it owned the place, its lights casting an eerie glow, and next to it, a dozen more figures, not just the tall, shimmery ones, but smaller shapes, moving fast, setting up something. Machines, maybe. Big ones. Daniel killed the engine a half-mile out, and we crept closer on foot, sticking to the shadows. What are they doing? I whispered, crouching behind a crumbling wall. Building, Dr. Patel said, peering through binoculars. A gate, or a weapon. A gate to where? I pressed. He didn't answer. Daniel did. Somewhere we can't follow. Not unless we stop them. We split up. Daniel and Scarface flanking left, me and Dr. Patel right. The plan was simple. Get to Tommy, get out. But nothing's ever simple, right? As we snuck closer, that buzz in my head spiked, and I stumbled, clutching my skull. Dr. Patel grabbed me. The jammer's failing, he hissed. They're overriding it. Before I could process that, the ground lit up, red beams sweeping the area. They'd spotted us. Shouts, human shouts, rang out, and I realized those smaller figures weren't aliens. They were people, men in black gear, armed to the teeth, working with the aliens. Traitors. Run! Dr. Patel yelled, but it was too late. A beam hit him, and he dropped, twitching. I bolted, heart pounding, ducking behind a rusted fuel tank as bullets and energy blasts tore up the dirt around me. I saw Daniel and Scarface fighting, outnumbered, pinned down. And then, I saw him, Tommy. He was there, on the launch pad, still, strapped to that chair, surrounded by those machines. His head was slumped, but his chest moved. He was alive. The aliens were hooking him up to something, wires snaking from his arms to a glowing orb that pulsed like a heartbeat. I didn't think. I just ran, dodging fire, my legs burning, that buzz in my head screaming now. I reached him, grabbed his arm, and yanked at the wires. "Tommy, wake up!" His eyes fluttered, dazed, but he saw me. "Ethan," he mumbled, voice weak. You shouldn't be here." "Too late for that," I said, fumbling with the straps. But before I could free him, that voice hit me again. "You cannot stop it!" One of the aliens loomed over us, its hand raised, and everything went white. Everything went white, and for a second, I thought I was dead. The alien's hand was inches from my face, that voice echoing in my skull. "You cannot stop it." But then, crack. A gunshot, loud and close, snapped me back. The alien staggered. A hole punched through its shimmering suit and collapsed. Behind it stood Daniel, smoke curling from his gun, his face a mask of fury. "Get him out!" he roared, firing again as more of those traitor humans charged us. I didn't need to be told twice. I ripped the last strap off Tommy's chair, yanking him free. He was wobbly, barely standing, but alive. "Come on, man, move!" I slung his arm over my shoulder, dragging him off the launch pad as chaos erupted around us. Scarface was there too, laying down cover fire, her rifle spitting blue streaks that dropped enemies left and right. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burnt metal, those machines humming louder now, the orb pulsing faster. Whatever they were building, it was waking up, and we were running out of time. Daniel grabbed Tommy from me, hoisting him up like he weighed nothing. "Go!" he shouted, pointing toward a gap in the fight. "Head for the ridge." I didn't argue, just ran, my lungs burning, legs screaming, the buzz in my head now a full-on roar. I glanced back and saw the orb flare, a beam of light shooting skyward, tearing through the clouds. The ground shook, cracks splitting the concrete, and those aliens didn't even flinch. They just kept working, like machines themselves. We hit the ridge, scrambling behind a pile of rusted junk just as Scarface caught up, blood dripping from a gash on her cheek. "They're activating it," she panted, reloading her rifle. "Gate's almost open." "Gate to where?" I yelled, ducking as a red beam sliced overhead. "Doesn't matter," Daniel said, setting Tommy down. "We're not letting them through." He pulled a small device from his belt, black, sleek, with a blinking red light. "Detonator. Wired to the fuel tanks under the pad. If we can't stop them, we blow it." My eyes widened. "Blow it? With us here? Only if we have to," he said, his voice steady but his eyes wild. He turned to Tommy, gripping his shoulders. "You okay, kid?" Tommy nodded, shaky but coming around. They wanted me to open it, said I'm the key." "The key? To what?" I pressed, but before he could answer the air shifted, like a pressure drop before a storm. The beam from the orb widened, and something shimmered in the sky. A hole. No, a portal, swirling black and purple, growing bigger every second. Shapes moved inside it. Dark, massive, coming closer. "They're here," Scarface whispered, her face pale. Daniel stood, detonator in hand. "We end this now." He started back toward the launch pad, but Tommy grabbed his arm. "No, Dad, I can stop it." His voice was weak but fierce. "They put something in me. I felt it. I can shut it down." Daniel hesitated, torn. "Tommy, you're not—" "I have to!" Tommy cut him off, standing straighter. "You said I'm special, right? Let me prove it." I didn't know what he meant, but there was no time to argue. The portal was roaring now, wind whipping around us, and those shapes were breaking through, hulking things with too many limbs, glowing eyes cutting through the dark. The aliens, on the ground, turned, raising their devices, and the traitor humans opened fire. Bullets pinged off the junk pile, forcing us down. "Fine," Daniel growled, shoving the detonator into his pocket. "But we're doing it together." He looked at me. "Ethan, you're with us. Scar, cover us." She nodded, popping up to shoot as we bolted back into the fray. It was insanity. Beams and bullets flying, the ground splitting, those nightmare creatures stepping through the portal one by one. We dodged and weaved, Daniel blasting a path, Tommy stumbling but determined, me just trying not to die. My head was screaming, that buzz now a voice. Not the aliens, but Tommy's, faint and desperate. "Help me!" We reached the orb, its light blinding, heat pouring off it. Tommy grabbed my hand, his grip cold and clammy. They linked us, he said, eyes wide. When they scanned you, I felt it. We can shut it down. Together. What? How? I shouted over the chaos. Trust me. He pulled me closer, pressing my hand against the orb. The second I touched it, pain exploded through me. Electric. Searing. Like my brain was frying. I saw flashes again. Stars. Planets. A lab with Tommy as a baby. Wires in his skull. Not alien. Human. NASA. They'd done this to him. Experiments. DNA. Something to make him a bridge between worlds. And now I was part of it thanks to that scan. Focus! Tommy yelled, his voice cutting through the haze. I did. Pushed back against the pain, picturing the portal closing, the machines dying. The orb pulsed harder, fighting us, but then it flickered. The beam weakened, the portal shuddered, and the creatures howled. Awful, bone-rattling sounds as they were sucked back in. The aliens turned on us, lunging, but Daniel was there, firing point blank, dropping them one by one. Scarface joined him, a whirlwind of fury, and together they held the line. Tommy and I kept pushing, the orb cracking now, energy leaking out in wild sparks. My vision blurred, blood dripping from my nose, but I didn't let go. Neither did he. With a final, deafening crack, the orb shattered. The beam died, the portal collapsed, and a shockwave knocked us flat. The machines went dark, the aliens froze, then crumbled, like puppets with their strings cut. The traitor humans bolted, scattering into the desert, but it was over. The sky cleared, the wind stopped, and silence fell, heavy and surreal. I lay there gasping, Tommy beside me, Daniel and Scarface staggering over. You did it, Daniel said, pulling Tommy into a hug. You both did. Tommy managed a weak grin. Told you I'm special, I laughed, shaky and exhausted. Yeah, man, NASA-level special. We didn't stick around long. The base team rolled in, more black suits, cleaning up the mess, hauling away the wreckage. Daniel said they'd bury it, call it a gas leak or some crap. Tommy was whisked off for debriefing, whatever that meant, but he squeezed my hand before he left. Thanks, Ethan, for believing me. Didn't have much choice, I said, smirking. Your dad's kinda intense. He laughed, and that was it. They were gone. Daniel, Tommy, Scarface, all of them. Leaving me standing in the desert, the jammer bracelet dead on my wrist, that buzz finally gone. I hitched a ride back to town, crashed at home, and waited for the world to make sense again. It didn't. School was canceled for a week. Official story was a structural collapse. Nobody bought it, but nobody talked about it either. Jake stopped cracking jokes. Sarah started carrying a rosary. Mr. Grayson quit. And me? I kept my mouth shut, but I couldn't shake it. Tommy's face, that portal, the feeling of being part of something bigger than I'd ever understand. A month later, I got a package. No return address, just a plain box. Inside was a NASA patch, a note taped to it. You're one of us now, stay sharp. No signature, but I knew. I tucked it away, locked my door, and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that portal, and wondered if we'd really closed it for good.